Hi, I'm Kaytlyn,
And I'm Brianna.
and welcome to the Readers Clubhouse, where we revisit our childhood favorite content. Guys, we have a guest today. Say hi, guest.
Hello, guest.
That was the appropriate response.
It's always the appropriate response. Guys, we have my friend Kavi coming to speak to us about today's book. Kavi, how are you?
I'm doing well. How are y'all? Happy to be here. Big fan of the pod.
Oh, thank you. I'm a big fan of your podcast, which we'll get to eventually. Brianna and I have just survived a windstorm, which is exciting. The area we live in, which now I'm realizing I'm doxing us.
Someone's gonna show up.
It was supposed to be the whole West Coast. They have to guess within
That's
that.
True. It is the whole West Coast.
Love it.
Yeah.
Kaytlyn doxing herself constantly every time.
That's true. She is the worst of us at that.
I mean, it happens.
Mm-hmm.
That is accurate. Okay, so Kavi, tell us about yourself. Just some fun facts about Kavi.
Oh my gosh. I mean, I've got 3 siblings. We all are very, very different from each other. None of them are readers, which is fun. So it's nice to be around siblings that are readers together. Yeah, I mean, what do you want to know? All I do really is read.
Yeah, I mean, I guess first question, why do you like to read? Where did you start reading? When did you start reading? And what?
Gosh, I started reading when I was a kid and just kind of never stopped, where it was like the first book I ever read was The Tale of Desperaux, like the first full chapter book that I ever read. I was like sitting on my grandma's couch, like reading it with the deckled edges. And I was like, this is it. This is the pinnacle of what life should be, is reading a story.
That is so true.
Very true.
Yeah. I love words. My granddad, when I was little, we used to do this game where he would just give me a word and I would look it up in the dictionary and tell him the definition. Like that was the whole game. So
it's so cute.
Right?
It is, yeah.
So I just love
we should do that for you to learn how to spell.
I mean, hey, whatever it takes, right?
I'm sorry.
I'm 32 at this point. I don't care.
You just asked yourself.
Yeah, I did. We've talked about our ages already before this.
No, because you intentionally didn't tell us how old you were. I should know. I edit the podcast.
Whatever. Okay, I'm in my 30s.
I'm not going to edit that out, Brianna.
Wow.
Just bleep it and make people guess.
Ooh,
that's a good
I like
idea.
that. Yeah.
I have to learn how to bleep things on.
I've actually seen somebody on another podcast do that exact thing. It's great.
Okay.
Oh, that's funny.
Yeah.
That's really funny.
Work for Kaytlyn.
Yay!
Woo!
That's what sisters are for, to give other sisters more work.
It's true.
That is absolutely what older siblings are for. Where are you in birth order?
I'm the third of 4.
The third of 4. Okay.
Number 1 and funny. Like I'm the funniest and I'm the prettiest and I'm the smartest. But I do.
That is bold. Right out there and saying it.
True.
I mean, one thing I do have is confidence.
Very, very true.
Hey,
you honestly need that to survive 4 siblings.
Really? Yeah.
Yes, that is true. I also have 3 siblings. I have 3 older siblings. And let me tell you.
You're a soldier.
I am. I survived. Okay, so you actually mentioned it already. So we're talking about Tale of Desperaux. And so you said this is the first chapter book that you remember reading?
Yeah.
That is so cool. I wish I could remember the first chapter book that I read, but I honestly couldn't tell you.
Well, you could always make one up.
I mean, I think we had a discussion about this in Redwall, that like this is the series that I remember getting me into reading. Brianna and I shared a room for most of our childhood, and honestly most of our lives. Let's be completely honest, or most of my life. And Brianna was reading before I was, and was reading Redwall, and I think because our dad read it a little bit.
He had the first book, and then it took off after that and everything. Yeah. Dad, I think, only ever has read the first book.
Yeah, he did say that when I chatted to him about it. But now I have, I think, 18 out of 22 of the books, and that is because I think Brianna kept some of them when I took them from her. Oops.
I only have 1 on my shelf right now, so.
That's true. No, you don't. No, incorrect. Because I gave you Outcast of Redwall.
That's not on my shelf, though. I borrowed that from you.
Okay, well, actually, you have 2 copies of The Bellmaker. So technically.
Yes. Okay, continue forward.
Okay, Brianna, we usually do some sort of book stats. Would you like to give us the book stats?
Yeah, I'd love to. It's my favorite part of the pod. All right, so
Is that sarcasm?
I don't know. You guys figure it out. Okay, so like we've already said, the book we're talking about this week, Tale of Desperaux. I remember reading this. I don't remember how old I was. I was definitely probably an older, maybe a younger teenager. I'm not totally sure. I cannot remember, but I definitely wasn't like probably the age range that I is technically for this book. That happened a couple of times for me actually with some books. So this book came out in 2003 and it is
That's 21
written
years
by
old.
it is 21 years old.
It can drink.
Okay. That I was just about to say that. Desperaux is old enough to go out.
Raise a glass.
Take him to the club.
He's got a little thimble full of wine or something.
That's so cute, though. And it had to be a really tiny thimble because he's such a small little guy.
He is so little. He's so little but got big ears, and it's actually super cute.
It is like
darling.
Dumbo.
It's very Dumbo of him, yeah. Okay, so it was written by Kate DiCamillo, I think. Camillo? I'm not totally sure exactly how to say her last name. And I didn't realize this, but she wrote Because of Winn-Dixie also. So if anybody else grew up reading that book, that also is one of her books. So she's definitely a very like a lot of kids, especially probably within our generation-ish and everything, have read probably quite a few of her books growing up at some point and everything. I think actually one of her movies was made or not one of her movies. One of her books was made into a movie, and it's about a talking squirrel, I think, is what it was. It's Flora and Ulysses. That was written in 2013 though, so definitely like more recent and stuff. So very interesting. Love that. Okay, so her genre specifically for this book that she wrote in was fantasy, which kind of makes sense because it has like this kind of a little bit fantastical medieval setting. If I remember correctly, there is no magic in this though. So it's more of the fantasy of this isn't like Earth or an actual country or whatever kind of a thing. We also have talking animals that talk with humans. It isn't just they talk amongst themselves or they can't be understood by humans. Literally at one point, the animals like say actual things to humans. So
and it's
that's
not
kind of
surprising, which is something I notice that every time an animal talks to a human, the human's not like, ah, a mouse is speaking to me.
yeah.
It's like,
which is funny because while I was doing, I didn't, being fully transparent, I didn't reread the book, kind of unlike what we've done with the other books and stuff, just didn't have time and everything. But I did do the Spark Notes read of it, so I got like some of the major plot points. And it mentions that Desperaux, or it's not, they're not supposed to talk to you. Like the Mouse Council was like, no, don't talk to humans. But then humans aren't weirded out when an animal talks to them and stuff. So very interesting.
very.
And then last is our kind of like age range demographic for this. The one that I first found, it was grades 2 through 5. So like probably like 8, 10 and up kind of a thing. And honestly, we're very much of the mindset on this podcast that books don't are not like you can read a book at any age, doesn't matter what demographic it's read in. I mean, obviously you'll enjoy certain things more than others and stuff, but I still read some like middle grade books just because like they have such good like fun characters and all that kind of stuff. So that is our age range for The Tale of Desperaux, and that is the end of the stats for this book.
I want to say one thing.
Yes.
Is that this is the age range, yes. However, there's a lot more violence than I remember in this book. And it's a lot more bloody than I remember. Yeah. Like when Desperaux gets his tail chopped off, I was like.
Also, the tail chopping happens twice. Not to him, but to another character, it also happens again. Yeah.
Yeah.
By the same character too, if I was reading it correctly.
Cook.
Yeah. It also talks a lot about abuse, which is
Yeah, it does.
just very like
that was one of the things, like, I remember reading the book, and that's like one of the big things. Like, the thing that always stood out to me in the book was the character of Midge, which we'll talk more about later, but the whole cauliflower ear thing, like, my brain, whenever I think about that book, that's one of the first things that I like remember about it, which is fascinating.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. In a plot twist, I'm going to read the summary. Brianna
Yeah.
is taking a nice short sweet break from having to read the summaries.
I'm back at it again next time.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. So a mouse named Desperaux is born very tiny with very large ears. From a young age, he is fascinated by the humans living in the castle, and especially fascinated by the stories he discovers in the library about a brave knight who falls in love with a beautiful princess and rescues her. He encounters the king playing music for Princess P, and Desperaux is in love. He vows to protect the princess and declares his love for her to his fellow mice. His behavior is unmouse-like and ends up getting him banished to the dungeons. There he meets the strange jailer Gregory, who plans to aid Desperaux in escaping the dungeon. Meanwhile, we meet a rat named Roscaro, who is fascinated by the light, a very unrat-like thing. One of his fellow rats tries to convince Roscaro to detest the light, to torture the prisoners like a good and normal rat. But Roscaro cannot resist the draw of the light. His adventure out of the dungeons lands him in the soup of the queen, which results in her untimely death. The disgust of Princess P drives him back into darkness, where he plots his revenge. We also meet Miggery Sow, a girl sold by her father and abused by her uncle, as she calls the man who bought her. When the king, distraught by the death of his wife, banishes all soup-related items in the kingdom, the soldiers take Miggery and all her uncle's soup-related things to the castle. After failing at every job she is given, Miggery is assigned to bring Gregory his food. Roscaro entices Miggery with her dreams of becoming a princess, and together they kidnap Princess P. Desperaux escapes the dungeon on Miggery's food tray. He overhears the plan to kidnap P and plans to rescue her. He returns to the dungeons and is brought by the rats to the princess, who's being held by Roscaro and Miggery in a cell. After much discussion and struggle, Roscaro is reminded of his desire for the light and begs for Desperaux to kill him. Princess P, in a great act of wisdom and forgiveness, invites Roscaro to have some soup. Together, Desperaux, P, Roscaro, and Miggery return to the light of the castle and sit down together to share a meal. There's the problem with summarizing anything is there's so many points, because I'm even sitting here thinking like, oh my gosh, I forgot to talk about how Miggery and Princess P become friends, but then Miggery betrays her. It's a whole bunch of things. All right.
And then you also, like, there's the whole bit where Desperaux is asleep for a whole day and stuff.
I also didn't talk about him getting his tail chopped up. It's literally just so many details.
You missed all the chopping of tails in that summary, man.
So vital to the story.
Okay, so first part of our next section is, Kavi, we want to know about your relationship with this media. One of, like, I guess you already talked about it being the first book, why it meant something to you, and what is it kind of, where is it in your heart right now?
I got a big old heart for Desperaux. I love him so dearly. I think it was like growing up and reading it, and always it's a really good intro for kids to have a love of story and to have a love of like light versus darkness, but also like done. I feel like it's almost like magical realism, where it's like kind of set in like a real world, but there are the magical elements of it, without it being like anybody has magic kind of thing. And I think it's such a good reminder that no matter how small you are, it's all about the amount of bravery you're willing to put in, and like what you're willing to be a part of, and how like the beauty of Miggery's story is like the hope that she has, that she always is like drawing back to that. And then you have Roscaro, who like his full name is Chiaroscuro, which is like an art concept of light and dark and all that stuff. And so it's like that kind of thing is also because he desires light, but then he's told that he can't have it, and then he keeps trying to go back to it, and then when he finally gets there, he's then like rushed off out of it by Princess P. And so I feel like I'm very fortunate to have read it as a kid, and it was a really good intro into like, oh, I love story and I love the idea of reading and understanding something deeper than myself and stepping into these worlds and getting to like glean what I can from it. And so then I reread it this morning out of preparation to talk about it.
Love it.
I've reread it a few times, like throughout the years of just like when I've been in book slumps or like when I haven't read in a while, I'll be like, you know what? I should just return back to what started it all. And then maybe I'll like be interested in books further on or
really good.
Like getting more out of it. And so it's been Desperaux and I have grown up together. He stayed the same size, but I've grown.
He's a small little guy.
Small guy. Small guy.
Little guy.
Really cool. Yeah. Can you tell us a little bit about like the world of Desperaux? What is the world like?
Yeah. So the world that he grows up in is really interesting because like it starts off really sad, but he's never sad, which I think is like a good, like there are parts where he's upset kind of, but he's recognizing like, okay, this is the place I'm in, this is how I can get further along. So he doesn't ever live in the sadness, but figures out how to like pull himself out of it, like through hope and through love for other people. And so the world that he grows up in is like his mom has him and all of his siblings that were born at the same time die. And so that's tough. And then she's like, oh my gosh, he was born with his eyes open. He has these big ears. This baby's going to die. What's the point? And even like, I'm not having any more kids after this. Like, this is it. And so I'm sure that was tough to hear from your mother as soon as you're born. Yeah. It's like, one, you're not good enough because whatever, but also you're the only survivor. So I'm just not doing this again because it wasn't worth it for you to be the one survivor. So that's tough. That's a little stab to the heart.
Just to remind everybody, this is a children's book.
No, yeah. She won a Newbery medal for this. Of course
she did.
Yeah.
She deserved it.
Respect to the queen.
Yeah.
It feels very similar to like children's horror novels.
Yeah.
Like, like Coraline and things where it's like there are these weird dark fantasy elements and like very real conversations that you're forced to have as a child, which I think are good. And I think that we should like be more intentional with the literature we produce for children. Yeah. Like children aren't dumb.
No.
Let's not write like they are, Yeah. So it's like, that's why I love like going back to old books that were written for kids. It's like, this is a dark book, but like what a good safe space to be able to read it as a kid and to have those conversations with parents or like older people in your life who can have real conversations about it.
Yeah.
So yeah, Desperaux growing up in that world of like no one really wants him around, and then also like his sister is trying to show him like, oh, you just eat the books, and he's like, wait, but there's something, like I have to read the books, so I have to understand what they are, and like this is not like there's more to what we are doing. And then later on when he like hears the music happening and he's like, oh wait, there's something more going on. So he just has a very inquisitive spirit that I really appreciate. Like childlike characters where he follows that inquisitive spirit instead of just being stagnant and being like, oh, like that's not my business, or I'll just my sister told me to eat the words, so I'll eat the words because they're the best part, which is true of books. So it's like
that is true.
Kate was a smart girl when she was writing this. She
clearly put some thought into this.
Just a little bit. But yeah, so I think she built the world well.
She really did. And I also, one of the big things, let's see, is this it? I mean, I highlighted a few things that I wanted to bring up in the podcast just because there are so many things I was like, oh my gosh, this is actually so deep. And for a book written for like a third grader, this is way too deep. And I feel moved by this. When Desperaux gets sent to the dungeon because he's confessed that he's in love with the princess and that he loves stories and that he wants to be a knight, and the mouse council is like, gross, you can't do that because you're a mouse. And they tell him to repent. And I was like, whoa, okay, that's a big...
It's a big word.
It's a big word and a big concept for this. But he goes into the dungeon, Gregory saves him, and then he saves Desperaux and says, stories are light. Light is precious in a world so dark. and then begin at the beginning, tell Gregory a story, and make some light. And I'm like, oh my gosh, what a great little line to put in a book, because obviously she's writing a story, right? She's telling the story, and the narrator is telling us the story. And just to have that line of stories are light, and in a world so dark, like we need stories because they bring light to us. It's just so good, and also so true, because Brianna and I have talked about this a bit of, for us, reading has always been an escape from a really dark world, but also it's brought a lot of joy. And I think my pastor on Sunday said something about how, I think this might be a C.S. Lewis quote actually, so maybe don't credit him. But about how like academic books like build up your head, fill you with knowledge, it builds up your head, but stories are what build up your heart. And so having even like Gregory have this moment of saying stories are light, and so we want light. So then I love also how do you say the rat's name?
Roscuro.
That's
how I've always read it, but I also could be wrong.
I'm gonna go for it because why not?
Honestly, that's kind of the fault, like the thing with reading names a lot of the time is like you're gonna come up with like ways of saying them in your head, and that's the way it is. And then they'll make a movie of it, and then they'll say it all wonky, and you're like, that's wrong. That's not the way that I've said it since I was 5 or whatever, however old you were at the time and everything.
Yeah.
Now, I'm not here to call out other content after the last Airbender movie.
Kaytlyn has feelings about that.
Oh no.
Yeah.
Are you gonna do an episode on it?
One day.
We're gonna have to at some point, because again, Kaytlyn has such strong feelings about it.
I love it. You gotta have an outlet.
When we do the Chronicles of Narnia, I'm also going to have strong feelings about the movies. Specifically Prince Caspian. I
haven't seen the movies.
First one, Chef's Kiss. The other two, eh.
Okay, good to know.
Fun fact about Kaytlyn is when I was probably 12 when that movie came out or something like that, I walked out of that theater in fury because of how badly they messed it up.
Yeah.
You're writing a letter to the producer?
If I'd thought about doing that, I 100% would have. Because
she would have.
Do it now.
I could do it
now. Well, they are doing the movies and stuff.
I know.
The Netflix is doing a series.
Who directed
Barbie and Little Women. I have some hopes.
Yeah. I didn't see Barbie, but I love Little Women.
Yeah.
It was so good. And just this is not an episode about Little Women.
This happened the last time we chatted too.
I love it.
I'm cautiously hopeful. That's what I'm saying about this.
Same.
But one of the things I want to talk about, both sort of world building wise and character wise, was how'd you say his name again? I've already forgotten.
Roscuro.
Okay. Roscuro, right, lives in darkness, and he has this that's his whole life. That's all that he's known. And then all of a sudden he gets this glimpse of light, and he's like, whoa, that is very different. It's very bright. It's warm. And then it says his rat soul longed inexplicably for it. He began to think that light was the only thing that gave life meaning, and he despaired that there was so little of it to be had. Which I read that and I was like, oh, I just got chills.
Yeah. When you say, okay, I'm the rat.
I have so many thoughts about that, because especially coming, like, for me, I come from a Christian perspective, and having this idea of this world is really dark and there's really terrible things and it's just chaos and sadness all the time. Real. And then to get these glimpses of light in things, and especially with stories, how you get these little glimpses of light, so good. And then also part of the rat thing, Botticelli, his I guess mentor, fellow rat guy, was talking about how a rat's job is to torture a prisoner, convince him you're a friend, encourage him to do all these things. And then Roscuro asks why, because he's like, I want to go to the light. This is what I'm being told to do by my friend. And Botticelli says, because you will promise it, but you will not grant it. You gain his trust, and then you deny him. You refuse to offer the very thing he wants. Forgiveness, freedom, friendship, whatever it is that his heart most desires, you withhold. And I was thinking about that in terms of Christianity and how we have these ideas of, like, we worship things that aren't God, essentially. And then you have the things that they promise you things, right? What is it? Forgiveness, freedom, friendship. They never deliver on it. And I was just sitting there literally mind blown. I highlighted everything that Botticelli said because it's so true and it's so dark. And also because, again, this book is meant for a third grader. And to hear Botticelli being like, you gain his trust, you refuse him, and haha, you become what he knew you were all along, what you knew you were all along, not a friend, not a confessor, not a forgiver, but a rat. And I'm like, oh my gosh, just the darkness of that. And yet, he's still drawn towards the light. And even though he ultimately, accidentally kills the queen, oops.
He didn't mean to. He didn't mean to.
He didn't mean to. He did, however, convince a very gullible young woman to kidnap the princess at knife point and bring her to the dungeons.
True. Hurt people.
So true.
That is very true.
That's what it all comes. That's the moral of the story.
I mean, it is, and this is the thing. I guess maybe we can transition a bit into characters. So I'm going to ask you like favorite character, and then least favorite character. But I also have some thoughts on characters because, of course, I do. So, Kavi, who's your favorite character, and who's your least favorite?
Oh my gosh. Here's the thing. I think what I love about this story is that it's told in like 4 different books.
Yeah.
Where it's like, because she breaks it up and you get to see, like with a story like this, what would be really easy would be to just tell the story of Desperaux and to let it go all the way through and to not funnel back into other things. So the fact that she stops Despereaux's story and says, let's go to Roscuro's story and see how he got to the point that he is. And then let's go to Midge's story and figure out why she got to the point that she is. And so you kind of like grow a love for all of them because you see how each of them like got to the point they are. And so you have like a sense of like, oh, I'm sad for Roscuro that he got to this point. So part of me is like, I love Roscuro so deeply. Because I'm like, gosh, like, oh, it's so hard. But I also like have such an affinity for Desperaux because it's like he just has a heart of gold the whole time.
Yeah.
But gosh, my least favorite is probably the uncle. He's a menace.
Yeah.
But I love the soldier that stopped by his door and said, wait, you own that girl? Not anymore. Taking her.
Yep.
I'm like, yes, sir.
We don't do that here, so we're going to take her.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I also love the cook that like in the end when she's like, you know what? I'm not even upset. Have some soup with Desperaux. Like that's just darling.
Yeah.
I love it.
It is this really weird random little redemption arc for her because obviously having mice in a kitchen is a bad plan, right? We all watch Ratatouille. Technically Ratatouille.
It's kind of good.
I think it's a terrible example. The whole point is the rat.
It is maybe a bad example, but the point is for health code reasons.
A better example is Mouse Hunt. Just saying.
That is such a good movie.
Thank you.
I've never seen that.
You've never seen Mouse Hunt?
I've
Okay.
never heard of that. No.
We need to watch it at some point.
Oh, Kaytlyn. It'll change
the freaking list, man. So her reaction, right, makes sense. Get this mouse out of my kitchen. But then at the end with the redemption of light, technically Miggery's the one that chopped off Desperoux's tail. But that end part where she's making the soup, she's like, technically soup is illegal, but soup is also really comforting. Mm-hmm. So I'm just gonna do it. And the princess is gone, the whole castle is
we all need some comfort.
And soup is a comfort food, which I relate to because I had some soup before we started recording. So
yes.
Brianna, I know you didn't reread the book. You did summarize or read the
summary. I have opinions.
Of course you have opinions.
Okay.
Give me your opinions.
Least favorite character is Miggery's dad.
Really?
Yeah.
That's fair.
I actually do have a question for people who actually read this. The thing that bothered me at the end when I was reading the summary, so I could be not justified if I'd actually reread the book and like saw how it ended. It says that Miggery and her father are reunited at the end. I did vaguely remember that after I was reminded of it and everything, but I don't know within what context because he traded her for items and then went off somewhere and then got thrown in jail for I don't even know what he did and everything. And then they were reunited at the end. And I'm like kind of curious about the context of that because I'm like, look, I am a proponent of forgiveness and everything and stuff, but I'm not a proponent of having to stay with the person that you have forgiven and everything and stuff, or having to fully reconcile with that person. Because honestly, even if you do forgive that person, that doesn't mean the person's always changed, actually, everything. So those are my thoughts on it. So I always get really wary when a character who's been abusive in any way is all of a sudden forgiven at the end and stuff, and like what the context of that is, because it's honestly a fine line for me. So I does he actually do anything, or does he just get found and then he just leaves it at the point where it says they were reunited? I'm like, I wouldn't want to be reunited with that man, kind of a thing. So I don't know.
Kavi, would you like
That's
to take
fine.
this?
No, I mean it's so the story for Riskiro is that the man that's thrown in jail is the dad, and so he tells him the story of like, I sold my daughter and I regretted it every day.
Okay.
So the entire time he's in prison, he's weeping over the fact that he's done this.
Okay.
Also the fact that like this his one source of comfort was that tablecloth, and Riskiro steals it. So it's like then he's like, I have nothing and I gave up my daughter.
Mm-hmm.
So I think it's like kind of like the weight of what he'd done had like
Okay.
finally gotten to him. And so at the end, when Megri the entire time is like, I want to be a princess. That's my one goal. That's like what I want so much. And sweet, sweet girl.
Yeah.
I love her to death. Just want to give her a hug so bad.
Yeah.
And so when she it's like I don't think he obviously didn't understand who he was selling her to. I hold that belief. I
Yeah.
don't know if that's true. Because it's not ever like explicitly stated, but I think it was kind of like her mom died. He didn't know what to do. He knew that he couldn't provide for her. So he tried to give her to someone that could care for her in some way. He didn't know what that meant. But also it's like he did abuse her in that
Yeah.
of like just leaving her. And so recognizing that. So then later on, because Megri doesn't have anybody else, she's like, she's such a gracious character. Like
Yeah.
she just wants to see the goodness. And so then at the end, it says that she doesn't become a princess, but her father treats her like that every day after.
Okay.
So it's like the
Yeah.
redemption arc of like he's realized and recognized what he's done and repentance. That's kind of
Yes.
conclusion.
Okay. I actually much prefer that than the context kind of that was given. Because again, kind of going back to our whole conversation about summarizing things and everything, you can't hit every bit of information in it. So having the full context of the source that it comes from definitely helps. Because like my perspective as somebody who just read a summary is that guy was terrible. Everything he still was, but you got to see more of a better picture of his redemption, but also the consequence of his actions. Because that's the always thing that gets me is sometimes when I read things, because I read a lot of romance, a variety and everything, and something that will turn me off of a romance so fast is if a character is forgiven for something they haven't done the work for the forgiveness for and everything. And that is not just, I feel that way about any sort of relationship, not just romance kind of a thing and stuff. So if I run into a character who's not done the work to earn back that forgiveness or that relationship, I'm done with the book usually. Or media in general and stuff. So I'm glad I got the context because that makes more sense that he is like he treats her like a princess every day after that. And honestly, Midge definitely deserves it after all of the crap she's been through. And I honestly, this is a weird direction I go with this. I really like Midge because she is not perfect and everything. I also she kind of in this I don't know if this is exactly the right direction to go. She kind of makes me think of a kid who possibly deals with autism or something along that spectrum and everything and stuff. And again, this may just be because of her trauma, because sometimes trauma can inform certain reactions and everything. Um, but how the stuff that happened to her made her so naive in a lot of ways, or just like the things that didn't happen to her. And it I liked how she never lost fully her innocence in all of that and stuff,
Yeah.
and like her desires and everything, even if they were a little bit misplaced about like the reality of her situation and stuff, she never fully lost that. So I I'm glad that she finally in the end gets a place where she's be able to truly be loved and cared for the way that she should have been from the beginning and stuff.
Yeah.
So I think that's kind of one of the reasons why she's one of my favorite characters, is because I kind of weirdly identify with her more than I would like P, because P's had everything. P is a good person from what I vaguely remember the context. I'm not like disparaging her or any of that kind of thing. But Midge went through terrible times, did a few started to go on a path of doing terrible things because she didn't understand, again, the context of certain stuff, or like reality of her situation in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
But it's something like identifying with a character who is not loved enough and then finally getting that love in the end really sadly hits a little bit too close to home in some ways and stuff.
I get it,
And
Brianna.
yeah, that definitely, I think that's one of the reasons why I sort of identify with her. Not fully, because I definitely am not like as naive or as innocent as she is, but it's still like her journey kind of is very much like something I identify with in a way.
Yeah. I yeah, I totally understand. I definitely think the uncle is probably lowest. There's a part of me that doesn't really like the king either, and I know that he's driven
Ooh,
to a lot of
yes.
things because of grief, and there's some grace you can have there a bit. But there's something to be said about like the children having to be the adults in the relationship, and I feel like Princess P really does have to be the adult in that
Absolutely.
scenario. And again, grief affects different people differently, and so the way that the king is grieving is a bit different than the way that Princess P is grieving. So yeah, so there's a little bit about the king that I was like, dude, come on, you've got to step up. One, you're a king, you're a political leader, you're a national leader. You've got to make a few smarter decisions than banishing all soup related items from the kingdom, which reminds me so much of oh gosh, Sleeping Beauty, when the curse of she's gonna touch a spindle, and so we're gonna banish all spindle related items. Just it's gonna come back. Like, you can't just banish all the things. People love soup too much. You can't stop them from making soup.
Yeah. I mean, all of those like fairy tale retellings or things along those similar lines where it's like your child is going to be your downfall, and then they treat the child like crap, and or they try to get rid of them and then circle back around, that kid comes back and does kill them or oust them or that kind of thing and stuff. Yeah.
It's like isn't there an Oedipus? The Greek. No, should I not talk about that?
I just am like, a great example, but like really extreme example.
Yeah, it is a really extreme example.
Especially because of other things that happen with other relations.
Yeah, this is a family-friendly podcast. Anyway, the point is,
about it.
I did think, it's the prophecy about a child, and the child ends up, there's a whole bunch of stuff, and it becomes those.
It's a tale as old as time.
It's a song as old as rhyme.
That's not what this podcast is about.
Well, also, I don't think Oedipus is a Beauty and the Beast.
It's not. That's not what I was saying with that. It was just funny because it is a tale as old as time.
I get it. Okay.
You look too much into this, Kaytlyn.
Duh. Brianna,
you're doing your best.
That's true.
All we can ask.
All we can ask.
My best is I read too much into things. But one of the things I love, Princess P is one of my favorite characters, partly because I love the parallels of like Desperaux and Roscuro, and then also Princess P and Miggery, and how there's very strong parallels like drawn between all of them. But for P at the end, this is when Desperaux forgives his father, right? And that's a whole bunch of that really moved me, because we're talking about forgiveness with Miggery and with her dad. And Kate, the author, says, forgiveness, reader, is, I think, something very much like hope and love, a powerful, wonderful thing, and a ridiculous thing, too. Isn't it ridiculous, after all, to think that a son could forgive his father for beating the drum that sent him to his death? Isn't it ridiculous to think that a mouse could ever forgive anyone for such perfidy? Also, I love that she said the word perfidy. It was like, go look that up at the beginning.
The breaking of the fourth wall. The
Yeah.
way that she writes the story is so...
It's so good.
It's so good.
So then Desperaux, still, here are the words Desperaux Tilling spoke to his father. He said, I forgive you, Pa. And he said those words because he sensed that it was the only way to save his own heart, to stop it from breaking in two. Desperaux, reader, spoke those words to save himself. And I love that that is what she's saying, and what she's teaching, this lesson that she's teaching, is that forgiveness, you're right, Brianna, because forgiveness doesn't necessarily mean reconciliation. It doesn't necessarily mean like the relationship is repaired. But part of that is because forgiveness isn't usually about the person that did the wrong. It's for the person who was wronged. So that, as with Desperaux, to stop his own heart from breaking in two, to stop him from, in a lot of ways, becoming like Roscuro, right? Because Roscuro was called a rat, and he went into the darkness, and he was driven to extreme acts because he wasn't able to forgive, I feel like, partly himself for causing the death of the queen, but also to forgive Princess P because of this really, and the way she said it was very despicable, is very terrible. And so the terrible things, the way that his heart broke into, the way that he was just distraught by that, I think I love the parallel pulled there. And then at the very end, when Roscuro is asking for Desperaux to kill him, and who stops him? It's Princess P, because it says she was feeling the same thing that Desperaux had felt when he was faced with his father begging him for forgiveness. That is, P was suddenly aware of how fragile her heart was, how much darkness was inside it, fighting always with the light. She did not like the rat. She would never like the rat, but she knew what she must do to save her own heart. And I'm like, oh my gosh, this is for third graders. How is she doing this? It's so good. And such a good lesson, because like trying to get people, but especially kids, right? They're very linear. They're very black and white. There's justice and there's injustice, and they don't usually have the nuanced middle ground, I guess. I love working with kids because sometimes, especially the kids that are like, no, that's wrong. That's unfair. It shouldn't be happening like that. And I'm like, you're right. It's still going to happen that way, though, because that's just life. There's a few kids like in our kids' church that, like, I would intentionally do games that were going to be unfair because, and I knew it was going to drive them up a wall because I'm like, yes, that's the point. The point is that it's unfair. And unfortunately,
they're going to call you. What the heck?
Their parents are like, yeah, good job, Kaytlyn. Life is unfair. I get you guys. Yeah, and so having to try and teach that nuance, and especially saying like she would never like the rat, like that relationship is never going to be repaired. But the last, I guess it's not the last paragraph. The last paragraph I highlighted, at the end, they all gather together for a meal and they're sitting down at the table. And it says, before you leave, reader, imagine this. Imagine an adoring king and a glowing princess, a serving girl with a crown on her head, and a rat with a spoon on his, all gathered around a table in a banquet hall. In the middle of the table, there's a great kettle of soup. Sitting in the place of honor, right next to the princess, is a very small mouse with big ears. And I literally like teared up when I read that because
every time.
Such a good picture of, one, like how forgiveness can work in a group setting and how it heals not just it ends up not just being about you, but it actually does end up affecting, like, your healing can affect other people's healing. And also, not to get all theological here, but looking at the table and what the table represents in Christian themes and having that idea of, especially Princess P, again, she's like, I'm never going to like this rat, but I recognize there's been some redemption, there's been some repentance from him, and he feels terrible about what he's done. He wants to be better. And that actually they all get to sit down together and share a meal at the table of the king. And I'm like, oh, yes. So good.
I see you, Kate. I see what you're up to.
Thank you. I was so shook by reading this and being like, I could write something about the gospel according to Tale of Desperaux because
it'd be a great kids' church thing.
It
there
would.
You go.
Someone put me in charge of kids' church. I'm just kidding. I don't want to do that. Saying to the people.
Wait, don't you want to do that when you go back though?
I mean, yeah, when I go back.
Save
but
that
it's actually
for
not
later.
in charge of kids' church. It's in charge of anyway. That's besides the point. Okay. Next is our final little section, our nostalgia rating. So I've been doing it as stars, but Brianna's like, it doesn't have to be stars. It can be literally anything it wants. So I don't know what we're gonna do. But we're not
Spoons.
what? She's spoons?
Spoons.
Well,
That's actually yeah, I like that. How many nostalgia spoons? This as a clarification, it's not how good the book is being written. It's not like objective. It is completely subjective. Where does it sit? Nostalgia rating for you guys. Kavi, guest, please go first.
5 spoons out of 5 spoons. This is the book that puts me back into. Someone I like posted on my story and my friend Katie slid up. I was like rereading an old favorite and she was like, why are you rereading a book? And I said, maybe I need a little childlike whimsy. And she said, you know what? I'll put it on my list. I was like, exactly.
I love that.
Exactly.
The perfect. I've never seen the movie, so I don't know if that would. Have y'all seen the movie?
A long time ago. So I don't remember my
ago.
thoughts or feelings about it.
Yeah.
Perfect.
Yeah.
I can't decide. It's one of those things where it's like you can't decide if you want to keep it as a book only in my memory.
Yeah.
But I do listen to the soundtrack. I do.
Ooh,
I love that.
that's cool.
Honestly, I feel like more books should get their own soundtracks, even if they never have a movie. Like, yeah.
Who's gonna pay for that though? That's my question.
Well, maybe
that's not the
Kickstarter.
There you go.
So there's enough people out there with a buck to spare.
Seriously, yeah.
It's true. Where? Never mind.
Yeah.
You're asking too many questions of a question of whimsy, Kaytlyn.
Yeah.
You don't question the whimsy.
I know.
Just let the whimsy be.
Yeah.
Which is funny because people are like, "You're such a whimsical person, Kaytlyn," and I'm like, sometimes.
You're
I
like,
think they need to have
whimsy. Whatever.
Yeah. They need to have a further conversation with you, and then they'll realize their possible error.
They need to have a conversation with the people that know me best.
Yes.
And then it'll be like, oh wait, sometimes Kaytlyn's whimsy is a lie. Anyway, Brianna, what's your nostalgia rating?
I'm gonna say 3 out of 5 for me. Not because I have any ill feelings towards it or any of that kind of stuff. Again, I didn't reread it, so I am missing some certain context with it and stuff. But I have fond memories of reading it, and I could see myself in the future if I had children or something like that, or if there were children in my life, I could see myself reading this book to them, along with my backlog of books that I have on a list of whenever that happens or maybe happens. So I think definitely it's not a low rating, but it's still like it's very memorable to me. I just didn't have I haven't reread it since I read it way back when, kind of a thing and stuff. So that's my thoughts. Yeah.
I can't remember. Kavi, were you guys talking on your podcast that came out recently about how 3 stars is generally it's sort of like the standard, and anything above that is like super, super good. Everything below that is super. Was that you?
Yes. I like every book that I open. I'm like, this is at least 3 stars. Yeah. Because it's a book that lives in the world. Yeah. It can only go up or down from here. Or it can just be a book that exists, and that's okay.
Yeah. I really liked that because I'm a chronic 3-star, not because I dislike or whatever. It's just
this isn't going to change my life.
Yeah.
I'm not going to think about it past the time.
Yeah. If it shook me to my core, or there was really big moments I was like, wow, then that's usually when it goes higher. And then so for this nostalgia rating, I think Kavi, you and I have talked about Tale of Desperaux. I think when we were in England, we had 1 or 2 conversations about it.
I'm sure. I love
probably because you also have a tattoo.
I do have a tattoo,
which is cool. Is it? It's an arm tattoo, is it right?
It is. Yeah.
Okay, you should show Brianna because it's cool.
Wait, hold on.
This is an audio podcast, but
that's so cute.
For the listeners, Kavi is showing Brianna her Tale of Desperaux tattoo.
It's very cute.
So yeah, I think for me it's a 4, which is the highest I've given actually out of the books that we've read.
Yes.
For 2 reasons. One, because I don't remember reading this I don't remember my experience reading this when I was young. I know I did. And then rereading it, I was like, how have I not reread this ever? How is this something I've not reread? Especially because it's about a mouse who ends up having a sword, which is
that's like right up your alley.
It's literally right up my alley. We're reading a whole series about mice with swords at the moment.
Yeah.
And so I was shook kind of by that, but also then the nostalgia of having all of these quotes and all of these themes that just fit really well into my worldview and all the things I could do with that. So I think it's a 4. And it's definitely something I want to buy a physical copy. I've been reading digital copies from library because it's cheaper. Yeah. Also, I do want to move to another country eventually, and I already have so many books. I'm like, I can't afford 4 suitcases full of only books. You
can find Tale of Desperaux at every single Goodwill that you've ever gone to.
Yeah, yes. That's a good point.
Yeah, and I might just have to go do that because it's just so I want to get one that is like a loan copy and one that I can highlight and like make notes in because I need both. Yeah, so I think that's why it's nostalgic. It's also thank you so much for like reminding me of this book. I know that there was a couple of options for the episode, but I'm really glad this is the one that we chose. Not that I don't like the other options, but I think
you hate the Hunger Games.
I don't hate the Hunger Games.
If you ever want to do that episode, I'm obsessed.
Brianna and I have had a conversation about it.
No, but this fits more into the Clubhouse vibe.
Yeah,
sure. That is true, actually. Yeah,
especially the vibe we've been currently putting out, which is mice with swords. So,
mice with swords.
Although
your first season, mice with swords.
Yeah,
I mean you're not wrong. Although we have when this episode airs, we will have broken that.
We'll have wizard griffins.
Yes, we'll have wizard griffins coming out. Have you heard? Well, I guess you'll find out. You will have heard by the time this episode comes out.
It's true.
Okay. Is there anything else anybody wants to say about Tale of Desperaux?
I'm good.
If you haven't read it, you should read it. If you've ever experienced grief, you should read this book.
Yeah.
Really good.
Yep.
So, like watching how you can respond differently is you have like the grief of being left by your family, you have the grief of someone dying, you have the grief of like losing love, and then you also have the grief of trying to desire light while also existing in the darkness. So
yeah.
If you've ever experienced any type of grief ever, read this book. Yeah. Also, if you haven't and you've tried to walk with someone else through it, this is also so
just read
everyone
the book, guys.
Read this or else. That's a threat and a promise.
I love that.
Yeah.
Threat and promise. Final question for you, Kavi. Is there anything you would like to advertise to our many, many listeners?
Hey, Ben.
Hey, Ben.
Hey, Ben. And Dad. Hello, Dad.
Hey, Dad.
Dad and Ben.
Hey, Dad. What's up? Happy you're here. My friend Brooke and I do a podcast called Sorry I'm Booked. It's on Spotify and Apple Music and all the things. We don't really talk about, we just kind of talk about everything that has to do with reading. So come see us over there. We are haters, so just be aware of that we give our full honest opinions about everything. Yeah, other than that, I mean, that's all I do really. I'm looking to move to Scotland in January, so.
Oh.
Hey!
Awesome.
Exciting.
Yeah. So if any of you are in the UK and want to hang out, let us know.
You know who you are.
Yeah. I love it.
I will say I've been listening to Kavi's podcast since you guys have been putting it out, and it's very fun. I like to put it on while I'm working.
Thank you.
You're welcome. It's very because a lot of the things you talk about are things I've not read, and so I get little tidbits. And then also your guys's your travel episode where you went and hit all the McKays. That brought me so much joy. That was so fun to listen to.
It was so chaotic the whole time.
Yeah, I could tell just some of the things you guys were saying.
It is one of those that I'm like, they have got to do a documentary on that because we're like in Knoxville just watching people drop like flies.
Oh.
And we're like, okay, I guess, whatever.
Because wasn't that during the summer too?
Pardon? It was
literally
during the summer. Yeah.
Yeah, That's insane.
So it's like, and they had just like redone the like repaved, so it was like black asphalt and just a recipe for disaster.
Yeah.
Man, go listen to that episode, guys, because it was really fun.
It's so good.
Listen to. I'm sure it was a mix of fun and chaos to live through.
I had a great time. Yeah. I was living my dream. I was like, yeah.
Oh, so good. Oh, all right, well, thank you guys so much for listening to this episode of the Readers Clubhouse. If you like this discussion and you want to hear more, you can find us on YouTube and Spotify every other Friday. You can check our episode description for our socials, and you can join us in the Clubhouse next time as we return to Redwall and discuss the next book, Marielle of Redwall by Brian Jakes. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.
I don't know why we're waving like this.
See ya.
See ya later.